All right. I think we're online. You can hear me on Teams, which is good. Thank you, everyone. Great turnout. Sorry about the last minute change of location. I won't blame anyone, but we had some logistical issues. But thankfully, Microsoft and the crew at Ingram came to the rescue and organised with Julian, our marketing head, this great venue, which I think, is nicer. But it would have been good to be at Microsoft. This is another. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You can't do alcohol at Microsoft. So we've got Phil joining us today from Microsoft. I've also got Jason, my head of platforms and AI. And what we're going to do today is kind of talk about Copilot. So we did an event last year where we basically sold the vision, and now you can actually buy the vision. And we've been playing with it for the last kind of few weeks. And we thought we'd kind of share with our clients some of the things that we've learned from it to kind of help them understand how it can help their business through the journey. All right, so let's kind of kick off. We're going to not do too much PowerPoint, but for those that don't know Fuse, we're a managed service provider. We kind of service the small, medium business market. We do IT support, so outsourced help desk, desktop support, server support. We also do a bunch of project work as well, and that's where some of the Copilot work is happening. We also do the technology procurement side of things, so your Microsoft licensing, your hardware, your laptops, and all those sorts of things. And then obviously AI is the big thing that's been happening. And not only are we kind of using the Copilot product, we're also dabbling with some other bits of AI that we're going to kind of share with you guys today so that you can understand how it helps our business and us with efficiency. So just a brief agenda. We're going to start off with Phil, kind of giving the Microsoft side of the story. I think they've done a fantastic job kind of understanding where AI can help business. Phil's been with Microsoft for 30 plus years now, and I think I've worked, and I've worked with Phil through many different organizations over the years. But one thing that I know is that if it's anything to do with Microsoft and Phil doesn't know it, it doesn't exist. I'm going to do a bit of a live demo, but Pete's going to drive it. I'm going to talk you through the scenario. And then lastly, we're going to finish off with Jason, who's going to just talk through accelerating adoption. So it's all great that you get, this Copilot license, but it's not, if you don't use it properly, it's not hugely different to the free products that you can get from Bing Chat or OpenAI. So what we want to do is kind of talk to you about how to get the most out of it and use it integrated into the stack. We'll finish off with some Q&A, and then we've got some drinks and canapes coming, I believe, afterwards for those that want to stick around and have a bit of a chat with us. So yeah, we'll kind of keep it simple. I'm going to hand over to Phil and give him a mic, and yeah, you can just clip it on and keep going.
Star Trek. Do I put it here?
Wherever
Beam
you
me
want.
up.
Wherever you want.
Just a quick check. Those online, do they give a thumbs up they can hear? That'd be good. Position the important ingredients right there, so I've got easy access to it. Good to see some familiar faces, some new faces. It's been a while. How are you, mate? Been ages. Is it really? Thank you. So it's nice to see a familiar face, though it's not the same name. So yeah, this is a great opportunity. Thanks. If we go to adopting AI, I'm a tech strategist at Microsoft covering Australia and New Zealand. In that role, I try to cover the whole gamut of Microsoft technologies, which is very, very broad. We won't get into them all today. I'll quickly rattle some off. Azure, Kubernetes, all the cloud services we've got around, security, information protection, modern work, dynamics, all that sort of stuff, which is very, very comprehensive. Start with this slide though, because as was pointed out, the OpenAI model has been around since, anybody want to give me a date when ChatGPT was launched? You didn't know there was going to be a quiz to get a drink, did you? 2022, and it was November. when ChatGPT was launched to the general public. But you're right, they started the business way back in 2015. So it's been around for a long time. But the ChatGPT element and that 100 million in 3 months, which is just insane. You want to guess of how many users there are of that type of service now? 1 billion users are using that sort of service for free today, the ChatGPT service. Why did it catch on so much? I mean, AI has been around for, okay, another quiz question. When was the first AI program was written? I'll give you a hint. It's older than me and I'm 63. Okay, 1957 was the first AI programs written using punch card and switch technology. But it was also hard. Okay, it was switch technology and punch cards, but it was even hard up until 2022 because you need to be a programmer. Now I suddenly could type on a keyboard into a browser, tell me the top 3 selling tennis rackets, and comes an answer. Amazing. Write a poem for my wife for our anniversary, out it comes. Make it sound like a pirate. Arr, me hearty wife. You could do that sort of stuff, and it became such an appealing thing. Let's move on to the next one. Look, we had some research, and I did share this last time we caught up back in, what was that, November last year? It was great. So they just wanted a refresher that when we went to the market and showed some of the early AI modeling, these are the sorts of ideas that came from employees who were really ready to embrace it. They're willing to, dedicate using AI if they could see the levels of increase in productivity that were talked about. I really like the one on the left. You take that on and read it. So significant until yesterday. What was the news yesterday that came from the economists? It's about the R word, recession. And we had a 0.2% increase, so we're going to avoid the recession. But prior to that, there was all this speculation that we were going to hit a recession. When I was listening to an economic panel about 2 weeks ago, the economists were talking about, please don't lay staff off, because that's just going to force us into the recession. What you need to do is increase productivity. And listening to this panel was quite profound because 2 of the panelists actually said one way we can avert that is by turning AI technology into our staff to become more productive. And one of them actually even mentioned the Microsoft Copilot family as being one of those vehicles to help us avoid recession. So clearly they did it and we avoided the recession. There's a direct correlation, right? Okay, let's move on. I did want to make this point right up front. We love ChatGPT. Do not get me wrong. It runs on Azure. 69% of all AI in the planet now runs on the Microsoft cloud in Azure. A good chunk of that is sitting inside of what ChatGPT does. A good chunk of that is now the Azure OpenAI implementations, the Copilot implementations. But something I do want to make you aware of, and somebody put it quite well in a webinar I was part of earlier today, you pay for that with your data, right? So your data becomes part of the model. And I think that's fine if I'm doing holiday planning because I can get ideas from other people, but I certainly don't do personal financial planning. And I certainly wouldn't be doing any business data injected into that world. And I've got some, who's got some horror stories? I can share some horror stories. You know, the Samsung story where, yep, okay. There's a programmer in Samsung, put the code up into ChatGPT, helped me optimize the code. And then a hacker found out the way to hack the code. Right? There's some real horror stories out there. A large company in our country wanted to release a new product. They put their business ideas into the product. Their competitor said, what would this person do if they introduced a new product? Oh, this is what they're going to do, and gave them all the answers. So please be aware that you're paying for that service with your data. There's nothing kept confidential on it. So the recommended model we have is the next model, which is obviously sitting in Microsoft. I didn't put it up there, but your data is your data. Your data stays in your subscription. And there's mechanisms within that to prevent data loss. So your data doesn't leave the business unless you prescribe that that data should be transmitted or sent or shared with an external party, and then alarms even go off if it's the inappropriate data that's being shared with another organization. So DLP, you've heard of DLP, data loss prevention. So that's a component part that is inside this model. You might notice some other words in there, prompt and web grounding. What's that all about? We're very passionate about responsible and ethical AI. So it's about being able to go to our systems and ask questions and not get a racist or gender bias or any way discriminatory response from the system. And if you try to hallucinate it or jailbreak it into that model, it says, no, I'm not going to give you that sort of response. So it's very much ethical in the way it works to ensure that any queries or requests that you make to tell bad jokes do not happen in this environment through that prompt and responsible filtering model. I will make the point, and I think it's going to be made later by Jason, is that there is also ways in which you protect data within your business. So it's great, now my corporate data is protected, but I don't want HR data being seen by general employees. I have a very clear example of this that happened the other day, even with the implementation of Copilot. Somebody put Copilot in, but they didn't put the governance within the platform in place. They enabled it at a school, students, staff, admin, teachers, and a student said, tell me the salaries of the staff. They were able to get that. Now, admittedly, no other school or nobody else could see that, but this is a classic example of implementing the governance and perimeters inside the business as well. So you used the term with me earlier, where's Julian, about maximizing value. This is a classic example of working with the Fuse team to maximize the value and the investment you've made in Microsoft 365 to implement those guardrails and perimeters within your business, not just the whole business. We move on. Now, I got a little video to play. If anybody watched the Super Bowl, I think it's pretty cool little video. So we just give you a sense of the sort of higher order of where we're heading with the co-pilots. I still get hair on the back of my neck thinking about the potential of this for youth today, but also for people my age. The value I get out of it every day is just, it's actually hard to describe. It gets you quite emotional, in fact, when you go to people and say, could you do without it now? And they go, no, you're not going to take this away from me. This is fundamental change. This is a game changer in the way in which we do business. If we move on, it's not just the bits that we've got that, oh, sorry, go back. Yep, I was a bit rapid. I just wanted to paint the picture that, yes, there's a bunch of those co-pilots that are what we call ready to use, right? They're in Word, they're in Excel, they're in Teams, they're in Dynamics, they're in abilities that you can roll out to connect to your Salesforce environment, to your ServiceNow environment, and bring that into the conversational chats. So they're ready to use. But some of you in the room might go, oh no, I need something that's tailored to my needs. So you've actually got the ability to use the platform to create, and maybe we'll go to the next slide now, thanks, Peter, where you can use these services to create your own Copilot. And I think I shared last time with some of you the example of my own daughter. Yep, so some of you remember the story about my daughter who's a lawyer. She's in mergers and acquisitions based in London. When I showed her this sort of potential back, not last Christmas, but the Christmas before, she went back to her firm as an equity partner and said, I want this built for my legal team, because we're dealing with international law, M&A, very complex, reading documents in different languages and spending an inordinate amount of time on translations and trying to understand. So they did it. They ingested all these documents, international law, all the contracts and terms. So her team then was trained how to ask smart questions. And this will come up later again in Jason's session about adoption. Taught them how to ask smart questions. Where are the terms and conditions which are mutually compatible for our two merger partners? Where are the points of tension between these two entities? These are the points of tension. What do you have as recommendation? 5 recommendations on how we can redress that. So based on experience and all the wealth of information. So that was purpose built. They end up calling it co-counsel inside their business, but massive differentiator. Now, usually at this point, I get somebody saying, but how does a legal firm deal with the fact they're spending less time on an engagement? They changed their whole business model. They changed their business model from one which was based on, the old 15 minutes charge to one, this is the outcome. We take a percentage of outcome. So that was really interesting how they've won then more business against competitors because it's, I only pay for the outcome that I achieve. You better keep me on time because I do get carried away, don't I? Okay. All right, let's move on. There's a whole lot of Copilots, as I've mentioned. I'm not going to dwell on them all. The most common one we're engaging at the moment is that Copilot from Microsoft 365. But there are those that integrate with not only our Dynamics family, but also with Salesforce, with ServiceNow, with Zendesk, about 150 different SaaS products to also bring that into a conversational way. There's ones which you can use to very rapidly develop applications too. In fact, I just off a call before this about somebody who's running an old CRM system for a particular charity that I work with. And we're saying, well, why do we buy a CRM? We don't need a CRM. We'll just use the Copilot to generate the small need that we have about volunteer management, donor management, and event management. I went, yeah, great idea. Click, click, click. We'll create that with a Copilot. Security and the rapid development. And that one there is being used by some, household names in development in Australia to reduce development times by 70%. Reducing development time by 70%. It's remarkable. But if we move on, we're really focused on this one today, which is the Microsoft 365 Copilot. I should update that slide. It should say Copilot for Microsoft 365. So I need to update that slide for correct branding. This was some findings that came out in November. So this is pretty new still that came out from a fairly extensive set of large organizations who deployed this and tried it out for 6 months. And we had a lot of learnings from this. You can read those as quick as I can speak to them, but I'd probably call out a couple about the productivity and speed that inspire. You ever get writer's block? That's a writer's block breaker. You can actually have a few thoughts, inspire me, generate 3 pages. Boom. It breaks the writer's block. Finding files, more productivity, improving writing quality, writing standards. I've seen excellent examples of that in education where they have this tutorial type approach. The student writes a sentence and then the AI writes a sentence. The student writes a sentence and the AI writes a sentence. You see overall the quality of the writing of the student improves to match what the AI systems are creating. I like the one on the, except it's in English. It's in English and Australian English now. We're actually doing Maori. We're in the process of doing Maori. We're struggling with the Aboriginal, the Indigenous languages because there's 300 of them, but we're doing those languages as well. I like the one on the right-hand side. So those users that were given the opportunity to use Copilot and coached on how to use it, and we said, well, okay, we'll give you a free lunch every month. 88%, no, you're not taking this out of my hands. And even when offered a lunch every week, they said, no, 77% of them said, no, I'm using Copilot. I don't even want a free lunch. So that was pretty telling that this stuff works. It absolutely delivers value. If we move on, these are some of the stats again that are showing that transformation. 71% time in mundane tasks. Faster at catching up on missed meetings. We're all busy people. You ever had, maybe you're a fortunate person who only gets called in on 1 meeting at a time, right? There's never having a duplicate time. I can have situations where I'm triple booked in meetings. I can now choose to follow a meeting and then I can go to the recap, or I might be late to a meeting. I can choose the recap function. It tells me what my actions are. One of my favorite prompts that I ask in a meeting I've missed is, tell me what were my actions. Another one is, tell me what tension arose in that meeting and show me the signs that where you've detected that tension in a meeting, where a disagreement occurred between a number of parties. So that's pretty cool in that one. Average savings of about an hour, 0.2. So if you're looking to justify the investment, and these guys can talk to you about the investment that's required of time to actually get skilled and the cost, that's pretty good saving on an average basis if you look at your staff costs. All right, moving on. I won't play this one because I think we're pretty tight on time. But that's a really good one. You can go to YouTube and just search for Microsoft 365 chat if you haven't seen it. It's about 4 minutes long, but it's a very good example of where it looks through emails, looks through documents, brings information together, tabulates, makes decisions and recommendations at the opening of a store, who should speak at the store, who's available at the time for the store opening, creates an email for them, including going to a video stream, extracting out from the video stream a quote. It's a video stream. It extracts the quote from the person who spoke and turns it into text, puts it in the email. And the last thing he does is right clicks, adjust, and make the email sound like me. So all the tone, the style that you write with, including the signature, is added to that email communication. So it's a long one, but you can go to YouTube and find it. All in the apps, embedded in those apps, and there's more coming that it's going to be embedded into, and more apps coming out that are specific Copilot related, one called Copilot Lab, which is one of the feedback we got in that survey, was that people didn't press the icon for Copilot because they didn't know what to ask and how to ask it. So we took some of the common tasks and put those in a little tiles view, and people go, oh, that's a good one, I'll ask that. Okay, and then it just points to the document or the person it's related to. So just to speed up the process. But moving on, here's a quick one. It's a 2 minutes long video and just shows you a little bit of that one, which is my favorite in Teams. Yeah, a couple of points in there, the citations, that idea that I can go back to specific reference points and go back to the source documents. That happens all the way. That's the principle of how the Microsoft platform works. Everything is wedded to a source piece of information and bringing that back to you. The sentiment, you hear the word sentiment? So it's actually able to detect in a voice, the anger, the sadness, the frustration comes through in the sentiment analysis as well as in the words. So if there's anybody typing with exclamation marks and capital letters, that sort of sentiment analysis is also captured. But we'll move on. I just wanted to emphasize, getting the value. Where was Julian gone? That maximize and realize all the value that you've got is very much what the root of these guys is about. And so those sorts of elements of security, compliance, privacy, wedded to the responsible AI is where we're coming from with the Microsoft 365 Copilot family. It is very broad. I mean, this is a slide I actually built many, many years ago, but I still keep using it because many people don't look to the left and to the right. They kind of think of Microsoft as just doing that bit there, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and maybe they think of Teams now and they might think of OneDrive. But there's many, many other aspects that you've got in the box that these guys that Fuse can help you activate in your business to give you, look at those capabilities left and right. But we'll move on to an important part as I get towards the end, which is there are some things you need to consider. This doesn't work with your on-premise file stores. So that's tough, I know. You've got some file servers out there, D drives, F drives, G, whatever you call those drives that are out there today. It won't work with stuff that is stored in Box and Dropbox and those other environments. It does need to be brought into the Microsoft Cloud to function. So I'm challenging you. There's some migration effort to occur in that space too. You do have the opportunity to think about consolidating the application suite. So you might be buying a lot of technologies from third parties today. There's a lot of overlap, which is what I showed in that left to right, east to west slide a moment ago. So there's maybe some tough decisions to make in the business about migrating to the Microsoft family. All of the graph is the important part here. And around that, I haven't got time to get into semantic indexing. I emphasize the word semantic. If you understand the word semantic isn't about using the correct spelling. It's not even about using the specific word that you're searching for. When you use it like a generic Google type search, you've got to have the right word. In a semantic search, you could say, I'm looking for dogs, and it knows dogs are part of the pet family. It knows that you're connected in terms of a person who's a dog owner. So all those neural connections are actually built up on the word dog, so that when you're doing a search and looking for an answer from a question, it's making connections that are personal, that are work-related, that are related to the family of dogs and potentially cats. Go and have a look at what semantic indexing is all about. But that's what goes on and does take a while to provision in your business. So you'll wonder why I've bought this Copilot thing. Has it taken a week before it shows up? Because what it's doing is it's going through your business and it's creating that neural network, that brain of connections across your organization. So you can do a semantic search on the graph. All right. These are some of the wonderful services that I know the Fuse team can bring to you. You've got your traditional Microsoft 365 standard services, and that's great. There's a whole opportunity for them to value add your investment in Copilot around these sorts of services, that migration to OneDrive, the application of compliance standards, the whole adoption and change, the training of your staff. Even in our business, you think we'd know what we're doing. We don't. So we have lunch and learn sessions every week. So staff tune in, people share ideas, best prompts, learnings in how to use the technology, because it really is a big change, a fundamental game changer in the way in which we use productivity. It's stripping away that mundane repetitive tasks and replacing it with really rapid responses if you use it right. I really did want to re-emphasize the point I made right up front about the better model, that your data is your data. And probably at a really extreme example would give you is we do get requests from government from time to time and law enforcement from time to time, maybe not for your data, but for some customers' data. We say emphatic no. They challenge us, they take us to court, we pay those court costs, you don't pay those court costs, because we take that responsibility for protecting your data as your data very, very seriously. And also at a technical level. We've just had IRAP certification, which is an Australian standard in and around compliance for the Copilot services as of last week. So not only is your data already at a protected level under the Microsoft 365, Microsoft Cloud, but also those services have now been approved to the IRAP level, the ASD, the Australian Signals Directorate. I see you looking at your watch. Last slide. I think it's my last slide. So it's an opportunity to use today to have a chat to the team at Fuse about converting all that excitement about AI into some real fundamental changes in productivity. Do think about, I call it do more with less, which is all the wonderful things that I thank you for using in Microsoft 365 and your acquisition of that, the seamless integration, the operational efficiency around. Do prepare your estate. And I know Jason's going to talk to that in some way around all those compliance elements, and also look to the adoption kits. We do make it publicly available. So if you're looking at doing some of that adoption yourself, we do make the kit available to you as the customer, but it's always good to work with Chuong and the team and Jason. With that, I think I'm going to pass over to you, mate.
Thanks, mate. I'm going to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what we want to do now is kind of give you all a demo of a use case that we see happen every day of the week. So one of the challenges that we have in our business is when the phones ring hot, when there's a Google outage. I won't say Microsoft outage. I'll say that when there's a Google outage, or there's a Telstra outage or Optus outage, and everyone rings you all at once. And we have a great call answering service, but the phones run hot, and we give clients the option of leaving a voicemail. And we said, there's got to be a better way. So we thought we'd develop an AI tool to answer the calls, log the tickets for us. So we kind of had a meeting. We decided, let's come up with a bit of a plan. So what we did was we kind of put that scenario through Copilot, and we'll kind of start. Pete's going to drive the demo, but we kind of start off with generating a Word document. So you want to, Pete's bringing it across. So this is stock standard Word. You can see there's the Copilot button at the top there. And if Pete hits Copilot and types in what he wants to do, it's going to generate some great content for us. So it says, create a high-level product brief targeted towards an investor for a multi-tenant SaaS solution called AI Supporter, et cetera, leveraging knowledge bases and facts. So it's about the prompting. So you want to make sure that you put as much information into the prompt as possible. And what it'll do is literally generate a white paper for us. And, some of this is just generic, but it gets that thought process happening. It kind of starts putting together the structure, who's the target market, a whole bunch of information. So, we kind of generated this Word document, and then we're like, right, well, where to next? And so, you can ask it to make it more formal. You can ask for more details. And you'll see that, as it kind of refines things, it'll kind of do stuff. So we all know that kind of ChatGPT can do some of this stuff already, right? So there's nothing earth-shatteringly different. Where it becomes powerful is when we start building it into our workflow. So the next thing we do is, we've got a bunch of Excel data. So we're like, right, let's start building the business case. So we know how many phone calls that we get in. So, this is a simple table that says, we've got 7 calls on average. They're 12 minutes a call. The cost per call is X, projected cost savings with AI, right? So what we did was we then start asking it questions around the data. Now, at the moment, Excel, as you can see, is in preview, but you can see that we've already said, create a line graph comparing the sum of overflow costs on a month-to-month basis. And it just goes off and creates a chart for you, right? So you think about what you want. And in the past, you might have had to run the graph wizard and do some all sorts of bits and pieces. Now you just start typing in, right, this is the sort of information I want. So it goes off, analyzes your data, and then it will come out with a graph eventually. Yep, there you go. It's come back with a great graph. So you can see there, it's got a graph with cost of AI on a month-to-month basis. You can then just go add new sheet, and then it's showing you the data that it's done and the graph on the other side. All right, so great. This is amazing. What do I do next? Well, I'm going to start having to put together a pitch deck. I need to present it to the team or an investor. And so what we do is we then open up PowerPoint. And the great thing is within PowerPoint, it's all integrated. So, we've saved that Word document. Next thing you know, we create a Copilot deck, hit the Copilot button. So what Pete's doing now is he's just basically typing in what we want and referencing the Word document that we've put together. All right, so you can see Microsoft kind of queries some, gives you some examples, but just by starting to type, there's a supporter brief there. So that's saved in SharePoint. Hit go, and it will start creating a Word deck. And because we've created the right templates with our kind of our logos, our backgrounds, our slide decks, it will actually drop it all into a deck that we don't have to reformat. So you'll see how easy it is. It will then draft a presentation. So you can see it's building out the decks one by one, what the slides are called. So for me, it doesn't replace the work, but it just saves so much fluffing around where you're like, oh, we've got to pull up an old deck and start modifying some bits and pieces. I have to start thinking about, the structure of the document. It starts putting it down so that I can just build out. And as you can see, it's now built out a deck with an agenda, intro. It just saves so much time. And then you do your bit, right? You come along and now and you add your bits and you start collaborating with other people. You add more videos, you add bits and pieces. But, in the space of 5 minutes, we've gone from concept, a draft document, some data, and then we've kind of put together a deck. And yeah, speaker notes are generated, Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, so, and as you can see, that's using our fonts, our backgrounds, and it's saved a tremendous amount of time for us. And then, yeah, so if you click on a deck and you go to Copilot, you can say, you can either hit the designer button at the top, which will give you kind of options. So this is where AI generates some design ideas, gives you different kind of formats. But then you can also say, make this slide less wordy, or add a picture of something into it. So you can do all sorts of things. So I don't know, Pete.
So off script there, you could basically say this picture to it. And
Yep.
See how you use the flash symbol. If it was in the SharePoint in the cloud, it would go to that picture, and it would. Or you could even say replace this picture with this picture. Picture on the slide with this picture, and point to the picture.
Yep.
And that does the insertion. Won't find the picture. If you want to find the picture, you have to say something like find a picture of classic one. If you go to those YouTube videos, the designer, find a picture of a girl playing with leaves under a tree, and it brings up the picture of a girl playing under a tree. You select that. The trouble is it doesn't show the full tree. So with designer and its AI, you can actually drag the image up, and it generates the rest of the tree.
Yep.
Even though the tree isn't. That's using picture AI.
Yeah, so the great example is we wanted some new T-shirts recently, just some fun T-shirts, and we ran an internal competition, and the 2 winning designs were done by staff using AI tools, and one of them was done by Peter, and it literally took him about 5 minutes to come up with a concept, a design, and we had them printed within a few weeks, handed out to staff. In the past, you'd have to have like a really talented artist. I know Pete can't draw at all. So, it really is powerful in that way. So, yeah, so Pete, if you want to, so then the last kind of part of it is I think we did the teams. Yep, we're going to jump into Outlook, that's right. So what we're going to do is basically jump into Outlook and say, right, we want to send this deck out. Can you draft up an email for this sort of audience? So hit the new email. There you go. No. Yeah, so basically you hit the slash button and then you start typing the document name and it should drop it in. I don't know what's it normally does it. Yeah, so broken on you, Pete. But no, so normally you reference the document. It's kind of like a shortcut, which not working for you now. Yeah, well, the other one, when we do a live demo, it doesn't work. Just do the slash first. It's not bringing it up. Yeah, it's just not even bringing it up. Yeah. So the next one was, we'll show you it after, but let's bring up the Teams example. So what we did was we actually got Teams to then screen across. So you can see all of my kind of recent chats are saved in the history. But what we said is, here's a presentation, write some talking points for me in a preparation for a board presentation. And so what it did was it then created the talking points that I could use, and I can just copy those. I can ask it all sorts of things. You know, if you ask, you can see on the side, you know, some of the chats, like even I have a meeting with Peter, and it kind of, I say, I've got a meeting with Peter. What haven't I responded to in emails, Teams, or documents that he's asked me to respond to before that meeting? And it will actually go through and say, oh, you know, you met with Peter the other day and you promised him you'd give him a pay rise, but you haven't done it yet. So that's the sort of stuff that it does, right? So it's really powerful, and I kind of use it every day of the week for all of my kind of workflows. I'm still learning, and you know, I think every day of the week there's something new that I learn that saves me that little bit more time. And so when I kind of look at the commercials of it, so what we did initially was we said 10% of our business is going to get these licenses. So we gave them to myself, Ken, our CTO, Gavin, our head of services, and Jason, head of AI and platforms. And we said, right, you guys go off and do it. And then the next phase is we said, right, we're going to give it to Peter from a sales perspective. And so we kind of just building, and now I'm getting kind of some of my senior managers saying to me, when am I getting it, right? Because we're seeing that adoption take hold. So what we're telling our clients is adopt it slowly, but then once you get momentum, don't let it stop you, right? Because as long as people get value and you're getting real returns, then it's great. So from that perspective, I find that, you know, it's a no-brainer for me. I reckon in the next kind of 2 months, half of our business will have this tool, because it just makes sense. Yes, it's a little bit of an upfront cost, but it pays for itself exponentially. Yeah,
So
drafting.
Some of the text I find is it's well organized and structured.
Yep.
It's a bit generic.
Yes, that's right.
The AI is saying something that, so you're getting buzzwords in there. It's
Yep.
innovative, it's exciting product.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Your reader will detect that.
Absolutely. So my team can tell automatically if I've done nothing to an email. They're like, you chat GPT the whole thing, that I'm like, yeah, whatever, right? I was busy. Next. But then other people will put a bit more care and effort into it. And over time, like I'm getting used to it. It's kind of like getting your EA to draft you something, right? It's your first draft. And if you send your first draft, everyone will know. So our recommendation is be prepared to learn. How 100%. Yeah. So my wife used to be a legal secretary, and she said the outputs that it does was basically what her partners used to expect out of her. So her partner would ring her up and say, I need to put this together, you know, the topics, and my wife would just smash out something, send it to him, it will give him a start, right? That's what it's about, right? It's getting rid of that EA, that kind of intern. I feel sorry for interns because in the world of law, and interns do all this work, right? So it'll make the interns better, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, so it's all about prompt. There's this thing called prompt engineering, and we think think of when Google and search started. The person who knew how to use search the best was the most successful. So the best people with AI are the best prompt engineers, right? They're the ones that know what to ask of it. So the developers that are asking it to generate code are not getting the generic code. They're prompting it every time. They're going, right, what if you do this? What if you do that? And it's really like, you know, like an engineer teaching a junior engineer, hey, I've seen your first level of code. Maybe you should try this. And that's the smarts. That's what we've got to teach kind of the next generation. So when I talk to my kids about this stuff, I'm like, use it, but use it well, right? Know that it's going to generate generic, but make it so that you're better, right? And that's what we are driving towards. Yeah, the more the more data it's got, the better it becomes. But over time, I think what we'll find is like it writes English better than I do. So, sorry. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll just end up kind of becoming, adding our flair to it. But at the end of the day, I think everyone will kind of put their own flavor on it, decide how they want to use it. For me, it's more about just getting my creative juices started. That's the hardest bit. I know what I want, but I just get that writer's block. I just sit in front of a blank document. You're like, where do I start? This just gets me started. Yeah, yeah. So Excel is the one bit that Microsoft are still in kind of pilot mode in. So they can only do tables at the moment. It can't work on pivots. It can't do any of that stuff yet. But I think over time, Microsoft are rolling out updates every week, every month. It'll get better and better over time. So I can just, yeah, accountants are safer now. But per se, yeah, yeah,
But the BI is quite reasonable in it.
Yeah.
Asking that and doing some basic formatting things like
Yeah.
remove the decimal points,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
yeah.
It's quite reasonable.
Sort it by this order. Make anything that's less than this number in red. You can do all those sorts of
value calculation for me, filter out the rows that are less than $1,000. Yeah, that sort of stuff. But as Chuong said, it's really just the basics at the moment. But I don't even know that it'll ever do VBA. Coding within that. You'd use Power Platform as your coding platform, and that's a separate discussion. If Peter was back on Word, you could do the Sounds Like Me, because it looks like you got the enterprise version.
Yeah.
And so that document you wrote, and you made the comment earlier about Sounds Like Me.
Yep.
One of the options there was write a poem, make it formal, make it informal. You can actually say Sounds Like Me, which is your answer about.
Yep.
If it's got the information and it knows how you've written in the past.
Yep. You can do it. All right, I'm going to hand over to Jason, because I think we're running a little bit behind, because I think it's a good topic.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me through this all right? Perfect, perfect. Okay, so what I wanted to do was really talk about how you can actually adopt Copilot in your organization and essentially get, I guess, a fast track towards productivity. So as leaders of a business, we all want to be productive. We all have to juggle many, many things at once. As folks that are just employees in the business, what we don't want to do is be stuck with menial, repetitive tasks. So whilst we do talk about some of the important elements such as security, understanding what your data estate looks like, making sure that you're shoring up the fences around how your data is set up and what that looks like. What I really wanted to do, because I think a lot of those conversations can be very bespoke to each individual organization. Yes, there'll be some overarching governance principles, but some individuals will be a little bit further along the maturity journey in terms of how their data is structured and what they actually look like. So because we're in a group with a lot of folk with, I guess, differing environments and so on, I thought let's really sort of turn this around and make it all about productivity, because ultimately that's what we want. We want these tools to make us better, faster, more efficient, more effective. So from here, what I want to do is start with where our employees, whether it's ourselves as individuals or those that work for us, need help. And I've broken this into 3 categories. By the way, Microsoft have broken this into 3 categories, and I really quite liked it. So one of it's around the broken meeting. Phil touched on it before. Who has 2 meetings, 3 meetings, 4 meetings blocked in the calendar all at the same time? And sometimes those meetings, they go for an hour. You're probably only getting 5 minutes worth of value, and you're one of these folk who's just turning up to the meeting because it's the only way you can receive the information that you need. We saw before with those examples around recapping a meeting, there's ways to actually accelerate that now. You can not attend the meeting and just actually get that recap. What are the actions? What are the key points? What did Mike or Mary say about some particular thing? Interestingly, only 1/3 of employees believe that they'd actually be missed if they didn't turn up to a meeting. Now, I used to work for a large telco and we used to be referred to as the Tarago because our name started with the same letter, and we would turn up with 8 to 10 people to a meeting, and it was just ludicrous. And if that meeting was only for an hour, you got 10 people there. Well, you can only get 6 minutes at best of talking time each, and that's if you don't let the customer talk. So the amount of people that turn up to meetings that don't need to be there is massive. And nearly 60% of people say it's difficult to brainstorm in virtual meetings. Generally, the loudest person in the room gets to speak. And look, we're out of time. We've got to go. Let's wrap up. And you've had an awesome idea, but you didn't get an opportunity to speak. And bang, you're into the next meeting. Days roll on, weeks roll on, and you never got heard. But you could have the best idea, but you didn't get there. The next one. So information labyrinth. One of the things that we see as a managed service provider quite commonly is staff churn. So we've got new starters, we've got leavers. Every time a new employee comes in, they've got to learn everything. How do I apply for annual leave? How do I actually claim expenses? Do I have a delegation of authority? Can I just spend up to $100 on something to do with a client without needing my manager's approval? What does that actually look like? How do I find where this PowerPoint template is so that I can use it for something for a customer? The amount of time that is lost just trying to find those basics, even having been in Fuse for quite a long time, I still struggle to find some things, because where Pete saves something and the logic that he has around where he saves something is not the same as mine. But being able to actually reference what I'm looking for through some smart prompt engineering, it just means it's there for me. It doesn't matter where it's actually saved, providing it's within, obviously, our 365 sphere. This one really resonated with me when I first read it. So a day a week, people that are heavily reliant on email, and every business leader I know of still uses email as their principal form of communication, particularly with external clients. So if you're losing 20% of your working week just managing email, if you can just reclaim even half of that back, then you've already got your ROI in place. The blank page. So this is one Chuong touched on before, which is literally like I'm staring at a blank bit of paper. I've got this problem statement, and that problem statement, by the way, it's actually real for us. In fact, the solution that Chuong touched on went live about half an hour before we got here. So we have a challenge where if something goes wrong, in fact, the first day after Christmas holidays is our busiest because everyone's forgotten their bloody password. So yes, there's self-service password reset, but people are people and people want to be supported through it. So we as a team, we can't put 100 people on just because everyone forgot their password. That makes no viable economic sense whatsoever. So how do we overcome the challenge that we've got? Well, we come up with an idea, we draft a problem, we draft as you would have seen, a statement. And to your question before, it's not perfect, but it's so much easier to read something, review it, critique it, improve it, than it is to just start with that blank page. So over 2/3 of people, and I actually think that's probably a bit low, find that they just don't have enough uninterrupted focus time to actually sit down, clear the noise, stop the phone from ringing, stop the messages from popping up, and actually focus on what it is they need to do. A similar number don't have enough time between meetings. So back to my little point at you before, sorry, man. Don't have enough time because they finish a meeting, they jump straight into the next one, then they jump into the next one. And by the end of the day, what was that meeting at 10 a.m? And what were my actions and what was I supposed to do? So that makes it really tough, and it actually makes it quite stressful, both for the individual, and then if they've let someone down because they were supposed to do something and it didn't happen, then now you've got an angst situation you've got to deal with as well. Copilot clears all that out of the way. And the final one. I like this one as well, is when people are feeling uninspired. I'm staring at this blank page, I can't get anywhere, constantly getting chats pop up, I've got too many emails, I've got, any myriad of disruptions. Naturally, as humans, we start to feel uninspired. We're not producing anything, we're not productive, we're starting to get a little bit frustrated with what we do. And that's where employee dissent starts to come in. So barriers to Copilot adoption, we've broken this into 4 categories. So we touched on security and privacy earlier. Now, this one's crucial. The great thing is your data is yours. So, and using the example before, if you've got your governance set up internally, I can't go and just simply do a search and say, how much is the CEO paid? If you don't have your governance set up correctly internally, then someone might be able to do that. But the great thing is no one external can get to your data. The way Copilot works is it will simply reference your data and anything that's publicly accessible. So I think, Ashwin, you might recall on one of the sessions, I think I talked about the taxation changes to low and middle income earners that was released and announced maybe 6 weeks or so ago. So whilst you can use Copilot, yes, and I think your comment was, couldn't we just do that with ChatGPT? And absolutely. So it'll reference internal data, but also external data. So it might be, what is our position on it? And that might have come out through a series of blog posts that your organisation may have written. But let's also make reference to the federal government's changes and see how we can actually bring all that together. Change management. So this is, again, it's an interesting one because depending on the complexity and sophistication of your organisation, change management could be this big or it could be massive. So some of the organisations that I've worked with recently where they've got more than 10,000 staff, they have more than 24 full-time change managers because change in those organisations is incredibly complex. They're heavily governed. It's all healthcare and aged care, and they really, really struggle. Well, I shouldn't say struggle. They have a lot of governance, and rightfully so, to be able to make changes within their environment because we are literally talking about saving lives and giving lives in some of those scenarios. Integration challenges. So Phil touched on before that there are a number of native integrations that already exist with some of the Copilot, I'll say, family. The great thing is with the Microsoft Graph API, you can actually write connectors into your own data and pull data into the Microsoft platform. So because, again, that would be bespoke and discrete for each individual organization that's here, we're not really diving into that in today's session, but I am happy to dive into that, one-on-one. That's no problems at all. And then the one I really want to target is skills gap. So this, for me, is all about the person who, the hammer's only as good as the person who's wielding it. And for me, what I really want to drive here is how do we make the individuals within your organization with the Copilot hammer in their hand as effective and as efficient as they can be, because that is exactly where you get the return from. Jump forward, mate. So here's what we really want to focus on. So how do we accelerate, track, because that's also important. We need to be able to measure the performance and then support the team in getting the most out of Copilot for Microsoft 365. And so the approach that we're generating and using internally and looking to promote within our customers is to gather a group of early adopters. And I'd like to, if you like the term Copilot crew, then it's mine. If you don't like it, it's a Microsoft term. We can have a poll on that later. But essentially what we look to do is say, right, this is the early adopters or the pilot group. For organizations that we've been working with, it's similar to what we're doing internally in Fuse. It's a handful of folk initially. Let's see what we can do with it. Let's actually start looking outside of our own bubble and work out how can some of our staff and how can some of our team get the best out of this. Propel Copilot adoption by utilizing, there's a lot of words there, modern communications methods. So basically what we try to do here is leverage that social view. So individuals gravitate towards social technologies, all of the Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. I mean, I won't list them all out because there's far too many. So using another Microsoft product called Viva, which we're going to touch on shortly, you can actually build your own social community. So the idea here is that if you've got some early adopters and you've got someone who has got a great trick on how to do something really neat and effective in Excel, or someone who wants to actually learn how Chuong did what he did earlier with generating a product brief, generating an executive presentation, pulling in some figures, and whilst we didn't get it to quite land, how we actually used Outlook in that, bundle all that together and serve that up as content that anyone can get at any point in time. So if someone's with the organization today and they've been there for years and they get up to speed with Copilot, that's fantastic. But what about next week and you've got a new starter who's never used Copilot, or worse, come from a Google house and still trying to get their head around the Microsoft stack? No new employee doesn't want to put their hand up and say, I don't know how to do it. But what with Copilot, and I actually quite like the name Copilot. I wanted to call it Wingman, but I got outvoted. The idea of it is it's literally that. It is your Copilot. It's not there as the one that's going to write it for you, but it's literally the guide that's going to take you through that journey. And that's why that point earlier about, it's going to draft it, it's going to be an 8 out of 10. And then all you need to do is actually get that last 20%. Another really neat feature in there is that we can enable users to be able to support things. So I've posted something about a really awesome prompt that's enabled me to do something really clever in Excel. As members of the community, we can upvote it. So you think about your own organization, and when you get mass adoption on this, start upvoting it, then all of a sudden those prompts start to appear more at the top. They get more readily viewed, they get more readily used. And all that does is lead you further and further towards being better at wielding that hammer. Right? A few of these do actually build. So one of the great things about what Microsoft's done already that we are absolutely riding the coattails on is they've got these five personas plus executives, which I haven't added onto here, and they've built day in the life of each one of these. So what does a HR person need to do? Jump forward for me, mate. So I won't read each of these out, but recruitment, hiring, onboarding, orientation, engagement, surveys, training development, etc. These are all facets that are going to be true for just about every HR or people team in your businesses. So what we're doing is building out HR-focused content so that if you think of your organization in, let's say, horizontal and vertical layers, so horizontal maybe being all staff. So all staff need to understand what our annual leave policy is, how to apply for leave, what our dress code is, what our acceptable use policy is around using technology, what our harassment policy is, and so on. So they're relevant for every employee. But there's also going to be some stuff, if we stay horizontal, that's only relevant for executives. What's going on with our latest merger and acquisition strategy? Are we looking to actually spin off a part of our business or discontinue a particular product? Then you've got our verticals, which is where this sits around HR. What does HR need to do? What does a day in the life look of? So we've got curated content that's specific for HR individuals. They don't need to understand, if we jump forward to the next one, what sales need to do day in and day out. They might do from a recruitment perspective, but not necessarily, how does sales actually go through and do their prospecting? How do they close out a deal? What are the other facets within the sales function within each of your organizations that are discrete to what you do? And let's actually build Copilot-driven material and content specifically for those roles. Now you've got a new seller who's coming on board, and now Chuong can say to Pete, mate, you've been here for 3 months, you haven't hit your numbers. You've got no excuse, we've got Copilot. So you've actually enabling people to really hit the ground as quickly as they possibly can. Marketing is another one. I won't go through all of these as well, but similarly, how do we actually leverage Copilot to drive our marketing efforts? Now, we're fortunate we've got Julian. Now, most organizations our size don't have a marketing body. They might outsource it, or before Julian came along and kindly didn't sort of throw stones at my marketing efforts, it would just be beholden on other individuals within the business to sort of pick up the pieces where they could and when they could. But now with Copilot, Julian is now a lot more effective, a lot more efficient, and is able to actually deliver more and feel more fulfilled as an individual who's a contributor to the business. Finance is another one. So whilst there's a ton of this, it is absolutely around Excel, and I think I'm really keen to see what they can do with Excel. One of the things that I wanted to do with it, and this could be a me problem, by the way. I wanted to grab the P&L for Fuse for last year into all the discrete business units, and then start forward forecasting what my workforce planning was going to be based on history. So I could say 2 years ago we had 10 support people. I'm making up some numbers here, and our revenue looked like this, and our number of customers looked like this. Last year, we had 15 support people, and this is what our numbers look like. Well, how many do I need to hire for next year based on Pete's sales forecasts? That's a good position to be in, because if anyone's been in the situation where someone's turned up and said, today, we need to hire new people, and HR turn around and say, thank you very much, that's a 3-month exercise, because that's what it is. So being able to do that forward forecasting and being able to pivot because sales numbers are above or below is super powerful. For us as an organization that essentially provides support services, if we break it right down, we need to know that we've got the right people with the right skills answering the phone and supporting all of our end users at the right time. That is super, super critical. So I'm hoping it's the problem with the person in the chair, not a limitation in the technology, but that's what I really want to see us to be able to do out of ourselves. Yes. Yep.
Every sales manager was that person's fantastic, gold standard. Like you start to maybe film that with permission, but etc. to say that's your starting point. The person's preparing, is not as experienced. That
Yep.
Copilot can help with.
Absolutely. So there's, and that's a really good use case. So we've got a presentation. We'll say it's this one, and we'll say this is on our product, and our product is this remote control. So I'm now presenting this, and let's argue that I was the gold standard on that. And then if Pete was the new starter, he doesn't know anything about these. You can push that content out through Copilot. You can take it a step further, because I'm okay at presenting, but you can actually use some of the baked-in capabilities in PowerPoint to tell me where I can improve. I said way too many times. So
Guys, I've mandated that any meeting that has a team involved has to be recorded. Right, so all meetings get recorded now, where it's more than like one-on-ones, no recording, but anything that's for a team has to be recorded in the business. And you can set up your team meetings to automatically record every single time. And you know, it's just simple things like that. We now have an AI microphone. So in a boardroom, for instance, it doesn't know who all the speakers are, but you can buy this Microsoft Teams AI microphone, and it actually differentiates all the speakers in the room. So instead of seeing the transcript just saying boardroom, it says Jason, because Jason's recorded his voice on the Teams thing. So there's all these new technologies that Microsoft are rolling out that over time will kind of make life easier for everyone. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That person had.
Yep. Oh.
And part of that's factual.
Yep.
I've got the statistics and content, but
Yep.
part of it also is style and presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but simple things like, you know, we had an ops meeting, which I couldn't make the other day, and I saw the, you know, the summary go out and it says, oh, you know, we told Chuong that he needs to do this. And I'm like, what? Jump onto the Teams meeting, jump to that point, and I listened to it. And the context of what was written in the notes is very different to what was said in the meeting, right? But if you weren't there and you didn't record it and you didn't know, and all you got is the notes, you'd be like, what the hell just happened there? So, you know, we're seeing that Microsoft obviously is a company that has a lot of remote staff now, and you know, the technology is there for us to record things, but I'm starting to now do like one-on-one meetings recorded on Teams, just because I can't keep up with all the information, with all the action items I have to do, and I don't really want to bring someone in the meeting just to take notes. And so this is like so powerful for me as an individual. I can literally have 10 meetings a day, and just at the end of the day, summarize all the action items that I have for all my meetings in the day, just like that.
You can imagine. Says he's promoted, someone's promoted to manager, and now they have to do an interview. First time they've ever done that.
Yep.
That chance to say, well, how does someone in this organisation do that, right? And you'd have to be careful with data, but
Oh yeah, but you could run as a mock scenario, right? So we can say, okay, this is me reviewing you as a high performer, an average performer, or a below performer. They're three mock scenarios, but you've actually got that process, because it's actually a really good example, because you go through a business and by the time you went around, it's like by the time you go around the room, you said this is the way we do it, but by the time it gets over here, it's going to be different, and that's really, really common. So one of the reasons why, when we were exploring what we can do with Copilot and then going, security we've got, we're pretty comfortable with what we do in security. It's Fuse have made a really solid name for themselves in that space. And now it's like, well, how do we actually get people to adopt this and just really wrap their arms around it? And like Chuong had I guess the problem statement before, which was, the operational efficiency piece. One of the ones that I've been sort of chipping away at my head is, how do we actually, I can't be at everyone's sort of side at the same time. So how do we actually get that pull through? And so seeing what Viva can do was just mind blowing. because it just enables us to deliver the content. We're building out like the program where, let's say it was just the folk in this room that were, Copilot subscribers, then we'll then drip out email information to you. This is how you do this. Here's a link. But at the bottom of it all will be a call to action, which is literally, if you want some one-on-one, it'll be booking time with either myself or someone else in the team. So because what you're about to ask is going to be different over here. And yes, there's some generic content, which is going to be super useful, but then you might go, you know what, I've got this problem and I just don't know how to do this. So we're looking to go, well, how do we build that out? Because then we can achieve scale. And what we do with Copilot today and what we do in 3 weeks' time is going to be different. And so we see that as being this constant and never-ending improvement cycle. Because the Copilot stuff that you can do today with, let's say all you could do with Excel was what Pete showed. I know it's not the case, but let's say it was. That's going to change. And then it'll change again and it'll change further. So in IT, we all have to constantly chase the speed of innovation and the speed of technology change. I believe with AI, we haven't even started running. Like, technology is moving fast, but it's nothing compared to what AI is moving like.
Let's keep moving.
Jump forward. Sorry, I do talk a lot.
Well,
All right, so IT is also another one that also need, and can benefit from technology, whether it's around security, whether it's around, what are the latest changes in a particular, what's a great example? So you mentioned ASD before. So Essential 8, does everyone heard of Essential 8? So I went and did a whole heap of Essential 8 audits and made a whole heap of recommendations to a number of customers late last year. And then in November, Australian Cybersecurity Centre went and changed what the Essential 8 framework looked like. I didn't have time to go and read the white paper because it's like 90 odd pages and it's all security stuff, so it's incredibly dry. So I just used Copilot to give me a summary, and then I could go through and just make all the amendments. So then I could very quickly write to all of my clients and say, here's all the changes and this is what it means to you. So that, without Copilot, would have been several days of pulling out what's left of my hair on my head and being really frustrated that I've got to go and manually go through it in amongst all the other change that's going on. So with Copilot, I was like, just go and tell me what they are. I'll go and work to other things. Once it's come back with it, I'll basically bring it all together and just share it with any of the customers that I've worked with. So it was super quick. Mm-hmm. Head read the 90 pages. Because that's what he lives for that.
yeah. So what? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be less flippant with my response. So what I initially did was send it out and say, these are all the changes in summary. Let's have a talk. I think it's important for us to actually catch up and have a discussion, because for you to remain Essential 8 Level 1 or Essential 8 Level 2 compliant, these are the things you need to consider. So for my correspondence, I was less worried about the finite detail. I was more concerned about making sure customers were aware that even though a month earlier, they had a tick in the box to say, yes, you're now compliant, I didn't want to be on the receiving end of an upset phone call saying, well, hang on, you told us we were compliant, now we're not, and there's more going on. So I did it more as a communications piece, and it was a kind of high level overview. These are the particular areas that you need to consider. But I wasn't sort of going right into the nitty gritty. But that's when Ken got involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty
It's
much,
the same, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't have used Copilot to say these are exactly the changes you need to make, especially at like a technical level. Click on here, open that. There's no way I would have trusted like that. But it was, how can I get meaningful content out to everyone really quickly that distills a summary of what some of these changes are and what people need to be a bit more.
So in the past, if you were in a hurry, you'd read a bunch of blog posts, you'd trust someone else that did the research, and you'd pull it all together. This way, you do it quickly, but you still need the experts to go through and do the detailed analysis.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's always. Yep.
They're trying to read hundreds of digest that in a day.
Yep.
They're not absorbing it in time in this sense.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, no, we definitely still
Okay.
do rely on the Ken Jeffries of the world to do the more detailed work.
So this is literally the I guess the conundrum that I wanted to solve. So how do we take folk that have got Copilot installed, turned on, activated, and take them from being a novice to being essentially a professional? How do we accelerate that journey back to, how do you become expert hammer wielders? So jumping forward, excuse me, on NViva. So we want to take a really modern approach to it. And what that looks like for us is, let's leverage the tools that are available to us. I think everyone in this room has a Microsoft 365 subscription. If you don't, see Pete or Dante. And so how do we leverage our investment as far as we possibly can? Let's sweat that asset. So jump forward. So community success is one of the big pieces here. So this is really about, within your organization, you're going to have accountants who have found a really cool prompt that has saved them a huge amount of time. They're literally motivated and driven with enough knowledge to find that, because it's a bugbear and it's a nuisance, and doing it manually just, kills their life. Once they've found that and they share it within their community, i.e. their colleagues, the productivity gains they're going to get are going to be phenomenal. So within the Viva platform, this all exists. We can build all this. We can populate it with all the content we need. We can break it into the verticals and horizontals that we need. It's not too dissimilar to how we handle, groups within the environment today. That's a little bit flippant, but very similar. Keep jumping forward. So this is what some of the social element looks like. So it's designed to be rich and engaging. It's designed to be something that people are naturally gravitating to anyway. So rather than sort of swimming against the tide of social media, what Microsoft have done here is to build a platform that has that same look and feel. That's all about engagement and bringing people onto that journey. And then what we're doing is going, well, how do we actually leverage that capability and push out as much of this Copilot knowledge and expertise as we possibly can? All right, I'll speed up a little. So we also want to create excitement. So anyone who's used like Facebook for Workplace, some organizations really grab it and embrace it. Some people do a little bit. If you grab it and embrace it, you get a great outcome. And this is going to be exactly the same. You grab and embrace this and use this to maximize the impact of your Copilot deployments, then you'll start getting all of those returns and all those productivity benefits. No, use it for anything. Teams, LinkedIn Learning. Yep. No, that's actually a good point. You can, yeah. So we can tie in LinkedIn Learning. We can tie in any other, well, I won't say any other, numerous other LMSs that you may already use. So if you do have an LMS and you say, I've got content over here, this seems ridiculous, why reinvent the wheel? Let's look at the integration between them. It does, yeah. So there's learning, there's a whole heap of insights. You build surveys, you can build out goals. So we subscribe to, we've recently pivoted, but we've been subscribing to the EOS methodology in terms of our entrepreneurial operating system internally. So if anyone's familiar with that, we have an annual planning session, we have quarterly rocks, which are largely, what are the big things that we're going to focus on this quarter? So we come together as a leadership team and we talk about what is it we're going to do? And we track those now in Viva goals. So they all cascade down. So Chuong will have some as the MD, and then the ones that he doesn't want to do, he gives to me. And then the ones I don't want to do, I give to Dante. So basically we all take ownership of them, and then we can report on how we're going, how we're tracking, what all the different measures are. So Viva as a suite, which I'm happy to actually talk about in a lot more detail, it's kind of like saying, what is Office 365? Well, there's all these parts. So the pieces that we're focusing primarily on here is really around Yes. Exactly. Yeah. So if you turn around, Teams is a really good example. So there's a guy out of Queensland, Paul Wood. He wrote this book called Adopt. We had a company called Adopt and Embrace, and his business was all about Teams adoption. He's written a really good book about it. And so what that was all about is you've got Teams. How do you actually like do more than chat? Because that's all we did when we first got it. We didn't know we could make phone calls. How do you share screens? Like all of those things. So whilst that was a textbook, that same sort of learning material, how do you make a phone call in Teams? How do you share a screen? I've never used them. I came from Google and a Slack house. So how do I do that? So in those scenarios, absolutely. It doesn't matter. It could be how do I send an email in Outlook because I've only ever used the Gmail client, or I'm being a bit abstract, but anything like that can go into it. Similarly, if you have SharePoint content, back to my little use case of how do I apply for annual leave, you can publish that content in there as well. So Copilot's the use case that really drew me into looking at Viva, because it solves that problem that I see, which is how do I get everyone in this room, 10 times as up to speed as we possibly can be. And by the time you get it today, your questions next week are going to be different. Sorry, Ash. Loom videos, it doesn't create them, but you can publish them in there. So I can go and create one on how to do something in Xero, and create a little video on how to do that, save it in there. You might say this is relevant for all of my graduates, let's say, and push it out to anyone who fits that. All right, I'm nearly at the end of this. So upskilling, showcasing best practices and stories. So, the use case before, I've got this great product idea. How would I turn that into something that I can present to the board? Checking your success, I think, is really key as well. So it's the effectiveness of any of these campaigns really come down to, what is the uptake? So you want to jump forward? So within the Microsoft 365 platform, we can look at how many users have actually got the license and what are they using it for. So Pete's in sales, Julian's in marketing. Now, I don't expect them to spend a heck of a lot of time in Excel necessarily, but I would think Pete using it in Teams, Outlook, Word, PowerPoint makes tons of sense. Similarly, if Chuong's operating in finance, I'll use that as an example, I would expect to see his usage in Excel to be higher and maybe lower in, say, PowerPoint. But this is a really good way to go, okay, well, who's actually getting the benefit out of this? And are we actually getting the cut through? Because when you got to make an investment in this, it's so easy to validate when you've got something like that that can just throw down and say, look, this is why we need, 4 dozen more licenses or whatever the case may be. Now, my final slide, which is literally a thank you slide, we've put a little form there. If you want further information over anything that either Phil, Chuong, or myself have talked about, hang about and ask us. But at the same time, you can throw your details in a form. We're happy to reach out and have a conversation, especially if you've got individual use cases that maybe you don't necessarily want to share in a group context.
So what we're also going to do is, for any of our clients that want to buy a Copilot license to test out, we're going to do a free session, a quick introduction session on how to use it. Jason, myself, Pete will kind of do a little bit of a workshop with you guys, just to kind of get you started on the adoption curve. And it doesn't need to be anything major. We did it for a few clients. They went off and did their own thing, and then they came back and said, right, our CEO really loves it, but he wants some one-on-one time, and we're happy to pay for that. So, it's all about just kind of getting it out there, getting some use cases, testing it out. And then if you've got any kind of more deep dive, then we can do it, and then we can kind of build out from after that. But I think it's one of those things where you don't know what it can do until you try it on your data. That's the biggest thing that I've seen. But yeah, it's been a game changer for me personally. Hopefully more people get use out of it. So I think we've done some Q&As as we've gone. We'll kind of wrap up the formal bit. Grab a drink. I think we've got some canapes coming. Stick around if you can. We're going to be here to answer any questions, and follow up with Dante, Peter, if you want more info. Right, welcome. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, everyone online. We'll also have the recording of this, so if you want to share it with anyone in your team. And I'll also send through all the Copilot notes because it's been recording, and I'll show you all the content that Copilot produces out of this as well. So it'll be good to see. All right. Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Help yourselves. These things are cool.